Welcome to episode 7 of the Shotgun Studio podcast. My name's Keith. I'm your host, and I actually have my first guest on the podcast. This is Chris.
Hello.
He is actually the co-host of our main podcast, The Workbench After Hours. So that is another video podcast that we do on our main channel, Boomstick Tactical LLC. We're about 65 episodes in on that one. We do one every Friday, so have a lot of learning curves that we've gone through. And so we wanted to kind of talk about starting a podcast, especially video podcast, and what to think about that you may not know or even come up, and some different types of gear that you can use in different situations, and Chris's experience with what he's got going on as well. Because, there's a story behind that.
Yep.
But, so if you guys do like gun stuff, like if you're into guns, stuff like that, shop talk, check out our main podcast, The Workbench After Hours. You may like it. We try a different whiskey every week. Like we just did a quick live stream of this whiskey that we're trying. And if you're interested, this is the George Dickel Barrel Select.
Yeah.
We were doing a revisit on this one, so that's what we're drinking. And if you want to know what mics we're using, this week I am using the Shure Super 55. It is a super cardioid dynamic microphone. So it's really sensitive right here and then kind of tries to get out the noise around it. I kind of like this, and the Shure SM7B the SM7B has a little bit more leeway with, it's not as super cardioid, so it'll pick up more if you kind of go like this.
More directions.
Whereas like if you notice, if I come around here, you lose me
a little
better. And it's visually, I love the look of this microphone. It looks retro. It's got the blue foam inside there, but it is awkward to mount.
Yeah, it's a very sharp looking mic.
Yes. it's awesome, but it's meant to be put on like an actual stand, like these 50s mics that you would see like Elvis singing with on a straight stand. So to mount it to a boom arm, you actually have to have this extension that I have on here, and then you kind of have your boom arm set up funny to where you don't really have any room down here. So there's this way. I've seen people have it kind of off to the side, but then that looks funny.
Kind of weird.
Or if you are somebody that can sit stationary and just want to have it on one of those desktop mounts, that'll work too. I like to move around. So, and I don't know. And I already have this boom arm set up, so I'm like, I'll put it on here. So, I just have it running through the Rodecaster Pro 2 on the generic dynamic mic setting, and then Podcast Studio as an effect. Chris, what are you on? Do you know what you're on? I know it's covered up.
I do not know. Is it the Rode?
Yeah, you're on the Rode Pod mic.
Ah.
So you can't see it because it's covered with a W2U or whatever the name of it is, pop filter. The Rode Pod mic looks good, but I think out of the box, without a pop screen or anything like that, it picks up some more plosives.
Yeah.
And I think you get a better sound with that windscreen on there. I did a comparison video with and without that, and I just think you get a better sound with that windscreen on. It's like $25 on Amazon. It fits right over it.
That ain't bad at all, really.
No. Yeah, it just sucks because you lose the aesthetics of that microphone, but in podcasting, it's more about the sound than the look. So
unless you want something like that right there.
Right, exactly. But I mean, those mics come in about $99.
Yeah.
So whereas this is more expensive.
Yeah.
I think like $250.
Yeah.
A little bit more. Cheaper than the SM7B, but I bought mine used, so
can't go wrong there.
No, and it works just fine. So so this is what we're using. His is going through the actual just pod mic setting in the Rodecaster Pro 2. They have a specific one for that. They also have a specific one for the Shure SM7B, but I tried this on there. I couldn't really tell the difference between this on the Shure SM7B setting and just the regular one, so I just put it on the generic setting. So for those people that cared about that, some people do. But so we want to talk about podcasts. And obviously, we have our main podcast that, like I've said, we are on episode 65. So that's kind of a lot. We've learned a lot.
Yeah.
We started kind of not knowing what the podcast was going to be about. We were like, let's shop talk is basically what it's going to be. And we had another co-host who had to kind of stop coming on because he had a baby. So he's still involved, but it's been Chris and I, and then we've had some guests on. And we finally found what our main niche is, and that's firearms, because that main channel is all about guns, basically. So we kind of talk about the gun community and kind of what's going on that week.
Yep. That, and we'll also talk about like safety of being a gun owner, being responsible about things.
Yep. And then different types of guns, stuff like that. And then we feature a whiskey of the week, which is really cool. So we kind of had some segments. We started doing the whiskey of the week segment kind of far into it.
Yeah.
Like we had one every week that we would just try and not really talk about it.
Yeah.
But now we kind of go in depth, try the different tasting notes and everything. So we kind of have some different segments.
Yeah.
And we found that to structure it a little bit better. So one thing when you're looking to start a podcast is you want to find a niche or a topic that you want to talk about and kind of focus on where does your podcast fit. This one, we're kind of about production and gear, things like that. So something to think about. If you don't know kind of what you want to talk about, it's okay. Starting off, you might branch off into something else and be like, all right, this is kind of what I want to focus on. So if you have a general idea, but it's not narrowed down, it's fine for getting started, because you're not going to have a large audience getting started anyway.
I think the main thing is just being consistent with it and starting it. Once you get consistent with it, then it just becomes natural doing it more and more.
Yes. And that you have to, because if it's one of those things that, we'll skip it this week, do it next week.
Yeah.
Well, that next week comes and you're like, we'll do it next week. And then you kind of put it off and it never happens. That's why one statistic is most podcasts don't make it past 7 episodes, which this is episode number 7 for this one.
Yeah.
But the other one, we've obviously gone well over that.
Yeah.
And we've made it a point to do it every week.
Yep.
Every Friday. We record on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
And then it goes out on YouTube and Spotify and all those things Friday at 8 a.m. Central Time.
Yep.
So keep it consistent. We've missed one episode, and that was because someone's going on. Somebody was sick or
something like that.
Something happened. But we've only missed 1 week of the last 65.
Yep.
Which is pretty good.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people can say that.
Yeah.
So if you could just stay consistent, keep going, even if you don't have a topic to talk about, just think of something.
Yeah.
And, even if it's a shorter episode, we like to keep it at about an hour. A lot of times we go well over that.
Oh, easily.
Yes. Very rarely do we go under that. But, just talk about something and maybe talk about other subjects and see kind of if that maybe gets more views or something like that.
Yeah.
Because your wife was actually a guest on our podcast. We did it when we first were trying to figure out what we were doing. We're like, we'll do an episode where the wives take over.
Yeah.
And so it was actually a Valentine's Day episode. We let my wife and his wife kind of take over and talked about whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
And your wife actually did really good.
Yeah. And she found out she really enjoyed it.
Yes. So what did she do?
Started a podcast.
Yep.
And it was a nightmare for me because guess who had to figure everything out?
Well, you're on the podcast, so you should know how everything works, right?
I know, but I was trying to keep it somewhat budget friendly and not go crazy overboard because I was like, let's see how well she does with actually keeping it with consistency and things like that.
Yes. That's one thing. When we first started out, we had an iPhone as the camera.
Yeah.
We had a different desk that my wife got me for like $50, and then 2 Samsung Q2U microphones that were USB because I did not have the Rodecaster at that point. So we just plugged those in directly to the computer, and it's pretty easy to add, I think, up to 2 or 3 microphones on the MacBook. Not a huge deal. You can do it. And just recorded straight into the iPhone as the video and synced everything up in post, and it worked.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. So, and then, the background has changed dramatically since that first episode. Like
changed dramatically.
Yes, everything. Lighting,
Yeah.
lots of stuff. So it was a learning curve. So I watched a lot of videos on how to make it better. And just once I realized that, hey, we like doing this, we're going to keep doing it. That's when I'm like, okay, I'm going to start investing in better gear and equipment. And we did. We jumped immediately into the Rodecaster Pro 1.
Yep.
And then I bought 2 pod mics, and we also still used the Samsung Q2U, which the cool thing about those is they're USB and XLR. So if you end up using that for a USB and then getting an interface, you could still use that mic.
Yeah.
And it sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
For the
they do a
price.
good job.
Yeah.
So that's what I use. I bought one of those and that worker bee for hers.
Yeah.
So
under probably $60 per mic.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah, easy.
Yep. And you didn't want to spend the money on a Rodecaster Pro up front because
Yeah, it's quite a bit of money.
yeah. So you went with something different.
Yeah, went with the little Zoom
PodTrack P4.
Yeah, P4, and it does good. I mean, we used it. We went to Tennessee, so we didn't have to carry the big Rodecaster and everything, and I thought it did pretty good.
Yeah. When I was initially thinking about getting the Rodecaster, I was torn between the two. I'm like, do I get the Zoom PodTrack P4, which was more budget friendly? It was like what, 150 or
150, maybe 200,
something like
at
that.
one
Yeah.
point.
And I think the Rodecaster at that time was $500 or $600.
Yep.
And so I'm like, do I want to make that huge initial investment? But it's like, if we keep doing this, I don't want to buy the PodTrack. And then I'm like, okay, well, this doesn't do everything I need it to. And then eventually buy the Rode. So then it's like, well, instead of just doing that, just make the initial investment. Try once.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
Yep. I didn't do that.
But that's okay because.
Yeah.
So how many episodes does she have now?
She's in 6. We just edited the last one.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a hot mess.
Does she know what's that podcast about?
It was about her and her brother when they went to Hollywood Studios for back in October. So it's mostly talking about like what they did and experienced there at Halloween Horror Nights.
So her podcast is interviewing people about experiences?
Yeah, experiences pretty much, and what they like and things like that. Their topics pretty much.
That was one smart thing that she did is she kind of narrowed down and she wants to interview people and talk about different experiences.
Yeah.
And so that's good. And knowing me, I'm kind of helping her out with stuff and helping Chris learn editing. So a lot of people don't know a friend that has a podcast, so it's a little bit harder to decide what you want to use. Tons of videos out there on YouTube on everything. So yes, you can spend a lot of money on it, but if it's something that you try but end up not getting into or just kind of forget about it, it would suck to have all that investment and then
not use it.
Yes. And one thing that people don't realize is, unlike YouTube videos where if you post one, it could get tons and tons of views. Podcast is going to be a lot different.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the same numbers as you're used to with YouTube videos. Because if you do a video podcast, you'll get the views on there, but it's not going to be anywhere near what your actual videos get. And then you also have your audio only platform.
Yep.
It kind of keeps track of who's listening or how many. It goes by downloads.
Yeah.
And somebody actually physically has to hit the download button, which you don't have to do to listen to a podcast.
Yeah.
So like Spotify, when I listen to a podcast, I never hit that download button. I just hit play and it streams, whatever, and that's it. So it's hard to keep track of how many people are actually listening to your podcast, which kind of sucks because I wish there was a way for them to not only, it's cool you get so many downloads, but how many people actually listen to the audio only version?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just the people that actually hit that download button and maybe download it so they can listen on the airplane or later or whatever. So it's really hard to gauge your audience at that point outside of the video version on YouTube.
Yep.
But Spotify is coming out with this thing recently to where you can actually have podcasts on that platform.
That'll be interesting to see.
I know right now Joe Rogan's you can actually watch on there, but they're going to open that up to I think everybody. So I got to figure out how that's going to work.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting.
Yes, because I upload the video file to YouTube and that's it.
Yeah,
and then the MP3 goes to Buzzsprout, who's the podcast platform host, and then they send it out to Spotify and everybody else.
Yeah,
any type of like Apple Podcasts, whatever.
Yep.
So since they're only getting the MP3,
they're not getting the video.
Right. So I got to figure out, how that's going to work? Do I have to physically go into Spotify and upload that up separately, or what?
That'll be interesting.
Yes.
Hopefully it's just like YouTube and just go.
We'll see.
Yep.
We'll see. But yeah, so equipment is one thing. Obviously, you want to get a good microphone.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to decide between a video or an audio podcast, I would highly recommend to do both.
Yeah, I almost feel like you should just do both at that point. I mean, you're already going through all the work to set everything up for just audio.
Mm-hmm.
Might as well just, how hard is it to put a camera, or let alone our iPhones?
Right.
It's an extra little step, and then you can just do both, and you can have it on YouTube and then all the other platforms on top of it.
And that gives you practice if you want to jump into making YouTube videos too.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of people might not have, like you guys are running into, not have a dedicated space in your house to where you can leave just set up for a video podcast. So you're trying to different ways to find an area, and it's a little difficult. So that's the one bad thing about having the video podcast is unless you have a dedicated space,
Yeah.
you either have to set everything up, take it down every time, or, you know.
Yeah, then trying to remember, okay, how did I have it set up this last time? What time was it? What was the lighting like?
Yes. So if you're able, like I am in an office here, to have I just keep everything set up.
Yep.
In same spot pretty much. Yeah, I move the camera around, especially if I'm doing B-roll and stuff like that. But pretty much dedicated space, everything lives here, stays consistent. Yeah, that's one thing you got to think about with the video. It is easier, especially if you're doing a solo podcast, to not have the video.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing it solo, having to pay attention and look into the camera and keep the conversation going, for me is really hard because I'm used to having you and maybe somebody else on the podcast, and we're just, you know, going back and forth having a conversation. Whereas if you're doing a solo podcast like I've been doing,
you gotta keep looking forward.
You gotta look at the camera and then keep the conversation going with yourself and the camera, and that's very difficult.
Yeah, especially if it was me, I'd have to write out like, okay, I got to hit these topics. And I was like, then do you want a notebook out so people are seeing, or you post it up behind the camera so you're looking at it?
Yeah, and people, like right here, we have a screen set up that is a computer screen that I'm actually using Ecamm Live to control everything. But a lot of times we'll put up show notes.
Yeah.
Like if there's a specific topic we're talking about and I want to have facts and read those, or like a tasting note for the whiskey we'll have up here and glance over. That's not a problem. I mean, people watching, if you look over at something, aren't going to really notice.
Yeah.
And honestly, most of the time, even if you're listening to a podcast on YouTube, you're not watching it the whole time.
Yeah, usually just listening.
Yeah. Most of the time, I'll watch it for a little bit, put the phone back in my pocket, and then go about whatever I'm doing, but still listening to it. But it's cool to have that option. And with as many podcasts as there are out there now, like there are so many, everybody and their mother has a podcast.
Yep.
Video ones are becoming more and more popular because
I think it also helps you. Like you might hear someone's voice, but not recognize them, you know?
Right.
So it's nice to have that video so you can actually see what this person looks like.
Mm-hmm.
You go, okay, now I know what they look like. I know what their voice and everything.
And it's a better way to connect with your audience, I think. Yeah. Like, and their audience can connect with you with actually seeing this person, and you're kind of looking at them at the camera every now and then. Whereas, I think on YouTube, it's a little easier to get noticed than say if you're just doing audio only on.
Yeah, because you got to think there's a lot of celebrities now are starting their own podcasts.
Yeah. So what are you going to go to first?
Yeah. So you're most likely going to go to a celebrity instead of someone small,
right?
Because they're going to have an unlimited budget, pretty much.
Unlimited, and you just want to hear whatever they want to say.
Yeah, that, and they usually got everyone editing for them, and so it's a totally different ball game.
Yes, but that's why having it on YouTube, you're able to get a different reach than you would on just Spotify, you know, Apple Podcast, stuff like that, because then you're going just off either your title, your podcast thumbnail, and I don't know. I mean,
trying to get that clickbait.
Yes. I don't do a whole lot of searching for podcasts on Spotify anyway. There's a few that I have, but they also have videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I prefer to watch on YouTube.
That's the way I am. I'd rather listen on YouTube or watch it on YouTube. Sometimes I do both. So,
which is nice if you have premium, because then you could shut the app and it still plays.
Yep.
So that's one thing to think about is if you're going to do it audio only or video, you don't need to have a dedicated like Sony camera like we have. The phones now are just as good.
Yeah.
Freaking, I have the 13 Pro Max.
Yeah, and you had the 12 Pro Max before that.
Yeah, we were using the 12 Pro Max, and it has 4K, and it looked awesome.
Yep.
The only thing I didn't like about it is you don't get that bokeh, the blurry background. So that's why I went with the Sony camera to kind of give us this blurry background look. But
I mean, iPhones could do anything.
The new iPhones now have the cinematic feature.
Yeah.
To where you do get that blurry background.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about that now if you have the new iPhone.
Yeah.
So your wife's gonna love that here soon.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the 15. Just might as well wait.
And the built-in stabilization now, if you have it on cinematic mode, is really good.
Yeah.
It's not as good as like say a GoPro, but it is way better.
Yeah.
Like I think I'm gonna start using my iPhone for B-roll because I have a hard time.
Yeah.
Like when I move in that camera, you could still see it shaking.
Yeah.
And
just shocking. You would think that has some type of stabilization in it.
Yeah, that some cameras do and some lenses do, but what I have doesn't.
Because I know most of the Canon, like Rebels, they have that stabilization and the DSLRs and all that. So I'm really shocked.
Yeah. I went with the entry level Sony ZV-E10, with the Sigma lens. So because I didn't know anything about cameras, so I went with a more budget entry level friendly camera.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, all right, I want to upgrade, but the cost to upgrade, it's like, ooh.
Yeah, cameras can get pricey pretty quick.
Yes, the ones I want. I'm torn between a Sony A7S III or the Sony A7 IV. The 4 is kind of a do-all. Like it's very good. It's good at video and also good at photo.
Yeah.
A7S III is good at photo, but it's great at video. And there's a significant cost difference between the two.
Oh, I'm sure.
So
they always do.
And they're going to come out with a A7 V or A7S IV. So
I'll just stick to iPhones. It's easier.
Yeah. I got a GoPro, but it's not for this format. I use that for the have it mounted to my motorcycle helmet for that type of footage.
Yeah, I don't know. Like anymore, like everyone's got their phone. It's easier to just go. And like I know with you and me, we're big Mac users now.
Yes.
So like it's easy. Everything syncs together. It's just, I don't know. I like that.
Well, then multi-cameras too for a podcast.
Yeah.
We started doing that, and I think it adds a little bit better visual, especially if you are watching it, because it gets kind of boring. Just
look at one face or
looking at us doing this right now. We didn't hook them up for this podcast, but typically for our main one we do, and we use two iPhones as the secondary cameras. The color picture doesn't line up perfectly, but that's okay. It still looks good, but if like the guest over here is talking about something or wants to show whatever they're talking about, then I could switch the camera over to them, and then you get a different picture and kind of more close up with them. And then like if I switch over to like say me, I could kind of look into that camera and talk or show off whatever I'm talking about. So it's kind of nice to break it up and change the visuals. That way you're just not in the static that you're seeing us here, which we're not doing. But if you are doing it with a guest or anything, most people have a camera, so you can just use that camera that they have and just put it on a tripod, and there's your secondary camera.
It's easy. Just shoot and go.
Yeah, I use your phone and my phone for our secondary cameras.
Yeah.
And then the Sony for the main shot, and it's worked. And then if you really get into it, you get the Stream Deck for a switcher, and then go through Ecamm Live, which I really like. But again, Mac only users.
Yep.
But there's a lot of things, especially when it comes to editing, that it's a learning curve too.
That, and there's so many different softwares out there.
Yes. And it depends if you're doing strictly just audio or video too.
Yep.
You have to think about having most Macs come with iMovie, which I used for a very long time, and it is fine. Final Cut Pro, you're able to do a lot more things with. So, and what I like about that is it's one time you pay the $300. It's like with Adobe, you got to pay a subscription every month, and it's expensive.
Yeah, we also got ours on kind of a discount.
Yes, student
discount. So,
so there's going to be a learning curve with editing too.
Oh,
Tons of videos out there, and that's how I learned, is just through videos,
Yeah.
watching video tutorials on how to use iMovie, and then eventually, I think starting in iMovie is really good because it gives you the foundation for Final Cut Pro if that's what you want to get into eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, because it's laid out kind of the same, so you kind of get the project screen, and your timeline is all going to be the same. So when you switch over to Final Cut Pro, it's still like, holy shit, like what's going on here?
Yeah.
But at the basic core of it, it's just like Final Cut or just like iMovie, just a lot more stuff you can do with it.
A lot
more. So nothing wrong with Final iMovie. It's a great thing and probably the most user friendly because you don't have all those extra options that Final Cut Pro does. So maybe starting off in iMovie, if you're learning how to video edit, it's probably the better way to go. So that way you're not immediately overwhelmed. Because going from iMovie to Final Cut Pro, I felt really comfortable in iMovie and I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, oh,
see, I didn't even really mess with iMovie. And I
Yeah.
just got it and I was like, what in the world is this? And like I had to start watching YouTube and I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It just gets, you go down that rabbit hole and you're just like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. I don't even want to do it.
it's just one of those things that you just have to do it. And the more you do it,
Yeah.
it kind of makes more sense.
Yeah.
So when you add in the extra cameras, obviously there's more that you have to edit. And depending on unless you use Ecamm and a Stream Deck, switch the cameras, which is really nice. So what we have is we have the Sony camera and everything goes into our computer. And iMac, or not an iMac, but a MacBook Air.
Yep.
And then we use a program called Ecamm Live. It has Mac only, but it is awesome. It's used for live streaming, but also record only, which we do. And it gives you all the controls. So you can plug in however many cameras you want to and either switch the cameras on this computer, manually switch them, or you can get like a switcher like a Stream Deck, and then you can just individually manually switch the cameras using this. So that's what I do is I have the Stream Deck right here. And then we're talking, I have the main camera and then the two other ones as buttons. And so if like, say Jacob's over here and then I wanted the camera to focus on Jacob, I'll switch to that camera that will go over to that and show him. And then I'll come back to the main camera or press a button, go to the other camera. Yeah. So that way I'm doing all my editing throughout the podcast.
Yep.
So that way when I throw it into Final Cut Pro, I don't have to mess with 3 different cameras. I've already done all the switching during the podcast. And that, really, I have to add in some subscribe buttons, maybe cut out some areas where I mess up or stumble over my words, which happens a lot. But it makes it way easier. Ecamm Live, you can edit as you go. If you don't have that, you can take your 3 separate video files, your audio file from, say, your mixer or, your GarageBand, whatever you record into, and you can upload those all into your editing software, which I taught Chris how to do today.
Yeah.
And Final Cut Pro, how to sync everything together into one clip.
Yeah, because
and then edit from there.
It was a nightmare. That's the reason why it took so long for her for this one. She kept having camera issues, which I think was because girls don't like to delete photos off their phone, I've noticed. And I think she just had so many, I think she had over 32 gigs just some pictures. So it like took up all the storage. So I think that's why her camera kept shutting off.
Probably.
So it did it 3 times and eventually they went to her brother's camera and I was like, this is going to be a nightmare to edit. Like that. And then like trying to sync it at that time was, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So they had, even though the camera kept shutting off, the audio kept going.
Yeah.
That was recording on their Zoom track. So he had one long audio file and then 4 clips of a camera that weren't the entire length of the audio file. So he was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm like, all right. So luckily he's got Final Cut Pro. So there is a super easy way to sync that audio with that video. And so in the areas where the camera was shut off, but it was still recording audio, I showed him how to just put her thumbnail picture in there basically to cover it up. And then what back into the camera when she got it fixed. So it's just stuff that you got to learn how to. Yeah, there's a learning curve, and
everything you do, pretty much.
Trust me, I'm still learning how to edit. I mean, There's this channel I watch, Think Media. They're like, just with every video and everything, just trying to get 1% better. So that's kind of what I try to do, and try to, with YouTube videos, maybe try like one extra cool little editing trick or visual thing. And the more you do it, the more you become comfortable.
Yeah.
Like, it used to take me a long time to edit that main podcast. Now I can
20
edit
minutes.
it pretty quick. Yeah. So especially since we use Ecamm, I edit kind of as we go, doing the camera angles and everything like that. And then adding, like, if I want to share a screen, I just, there's an option in there where you can share screens and all sorts of different things with Ecamm Live. So if you're thinking into getting into video podcasting and do have a Mac computer, something to look into. It's like a monthly subscription, and there's different levels, but it will make your life easier. Trust me. And then there's a preview window. So like on my Sony, there's a little LCD screen. I can kind of see it.
Yeah.
I can't see if we're on focus or anything.
Yeah.
But on here, there's a preview screen right here off screen.
Makes it so much easier.
I can see what's going on. Everything's in focus.
Yeah.
And then if I want to share my screen, I just change it, and then bam, it'll, like a website or something I got to pull up. We can do that. Interview mode is really nice too. We've had on the main podcast a couple different companies in the industry that we interviewed, and really nice to edit that as you go.
Yeah. It was also nice too that you could sit there and look at them too.
Yes.
In interview mode and actually see them and talk to them and react with them.
Yes. So that's cool. If you want to do a virtual interviewee, Ecamm Live makes it really nice to do that. You send them a link, whether it's to their phone or their computer, and then they click on the link. As long as they have the camera on their phone, they can just use that, or their laptop, and they don't have to have Ecamm Live specifically. It just will start recording.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So much easier.
Yeah. So there is a huge learning curve to doing a podcast, but you'll get better as you go.
Yeah, it becomes easier as time goes by too. Like at first, I hated hearing my voice, and now I'm just so used to it.
Right. Yeah, that
was like
one
the biggest thing.
thing to get over is listening to your voice. You're like, oh my god, and it depends on the mic too. Like, each mic may make you sound better or worse. Like some people sound really good on that Rode Pod mic, and some people sound really bad.
Yeah,
because it's more on the mid to higher tones. Whereas you have a deep voice, so you sound good on that. So because it's picking up more of the higher tones too, along with that deep voice. So it really depends on your mic, and you want to get a good quality mic if you're going to do a podcast, because that's what people are doing, is listening to you. So you don't want to go buy a cheap Amazon $30 microphone.
Yeah, well, that too, and you also need to know like what type of person you are. Are you someone that moves all the time? So do you need a condenser mic, or are you someone that can just sit there and talk straight into it all the time? So, dynamic mic.
Oh, how did we figure that out, Chris?
I don't know. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Our other co-host is somebody that
moves around all the time.
Cannot sit still. So the dynamic microphone did not work for him. We had to get him a condenser microphone, and that's when I kind of learned about that, and he had the neat worker bee.
Yep.
And it allows you a little more flexibility than a dynamic mic, because dynamic mics, you want to stay kind of in front of it, especially for a podcast, whereas you could still use condenser microphones in a podcast. They sound great. I have the neat King Bee that I'm going to be doing a video on, and the Lewitt. Like, there's several condenser microphones. They sound great. They pick up more background noise.
Yeah.
But you're able to move around, kind of back up, and still capture your voice. Whereas, like this one, right now, as I move backwards, you probably can't hear me as clear as being right there. Front.
Yeah.
And these sound better when you're close to them.
Yeah, I think also too, like if you're just starting and not knowing anything about mics, I think a condenser mic will be great for you.
Yes.
Because then you can just sit it anywhere as long as you're close to it, and you can talk and have your conversation or do your podcast.
Because you're not used to sitting in front of a mic at that point.
Yeah. So then it gives you that flexibility. You're not like all nervous about, I can't move, I got to stay at this one position. Mm-hmm. And the condenser mic gives you that ability to kind of like relax.
Look at this guy
Man,
talking about microphones.
it's bad. Yeah.
Yep. Even though you've been on the podcast every episode, actually, I think,
Yeah.
except for like one or two, maybe, you kind of pay attention to the stuff.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just the editing is where you're
Yeah.
finding it to become difficult because you don't. I mean, you come over. I'm like, hey, look at this new whatever gear I got and stuff like that. But you don't actually see me edit
No.
the podcast, and
No.
that's a huge thing. If your wife is making you edit the podcast, that's hard to do.
Yeah. I'm literally watching YouTube videos and trying to figure out as I go or just playing around. Like her intro, I literally found it in another software program. I was like, I wonder if I can just go in there and edit things. So I just started tinkering with it and was like, oh, I can edit all of this. Cool. I can add layers to this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I finally came up with the intro. I was like, okay, but how do I add music now?
Yeah.
Things like that. But yeah, it's a good thing he's on speed dial.
Yeah, FaceTime.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a big learning curve, but you'll figure it out. Lots of videos out there. I'm trying to do I got some videos on editing, but I need to do more. It's just trying to find the time between two YouTube channels and podcasts, but you get some more out there.
Yeah, that and like I would highly recommend if you're a student and you do use Mac, go ahead and just spend the money they got a student bundle where it gives you like Final Cut Pro, GarageBand Pro, Logic Pro. I think it's like 2 other softwares it comes with.
Motion or not Motion.
I think it does come with Motion. There's another one, and it's like $400. Yes, it's a lot of money, but you got to think about Final Cut Pro by itself is $400.
Was it 400?
Yeah.
Or was it?
It was $300 for all 4 or 5.
Yeah, because it was $299 as a student. And you got
but
all
like
that stuff.
Final Cut Pro was like $399, $299 by itself.
By itself, it's $299.
Yeah, so you're getting that, and then on top of it, you're getting everything else at the pro level. And then once you buy it, it's yours.
Yes,
which is amazing.
And the one thing about Final Cut Pro versus iMovie is you can buy plugins.
Yeah,
that's how you see all these people do all these crazy editing things, these cool transitions and stuff. It's because, and you're like in Final Cut Pro, and you're like, how are they doing that? A lot of it's plugins that you can get. Motion VFX is a website that has all these different plugins. That's how you get the subscribe buttons at the bottom, or the
Instagram,
social media stuff popping up, and different transitions, effects is through plugins, which you can buy outside of Final Cut Pro, but then have them imported in. And there's all sorts of stuff. You get cinematic things. It's endless.
Yeah, everything. But I think it's worth it to do it through the student bundle.
Yeah.
Like,
even
if you're an adult, use your kid then at that point and try to do it that way.
So I was debating about going back to college for photography, and I haven't yet, but I applied to our local junior college, community college, which I had gone to my first 2 years outside of high school anyway. So I reapplied, and it's just literally free to apply. And then they give you a student email, which I got my old student email back, and that's all you need.
Yeah.
To get this. Like, you don't actually have to show anything else other than your student email and ID or something. Maybe
they said maybe they audit it, but I don't think they do.
Got anything yet?
Yeah,
and that's also another good way to get, say, like a Apple computer at a good price.
Yeah,
through their student education program.
Yeah, that, and then I always look to, because Apple on their website actually has a refurbished section. Mm-hmm. That's how I got my iMac. I bought a refurbished iMac station, and I did a bunch of research on which one I wanted. I made sure it was a 27-inch so I can upgrade the RAM on it. And yeah, like I tried to keep it as budget friendly as I could.
Yep. So there's all sorts of obviously microphones that are going to be out there. So do some research on those. If you're going to spend money on anything, your microphone's going to be one area.
Yeah.
Video podcasts, you can initially get away with your phone, or if you got the newer 13s or newer, those will work just fine because you'll get the blurry background with those. So you don't necessarily have to worry about a dedicated camera, which can get expensive. But you really want to focus on your microphone, so your audio, and then depending on what microphone you want, generally you're going to get a better sound out of one that's XLR.
Yeah.
So you want to get an interface, especially if you're going to have multiple guests. It's easier to plug those into your computer than just say through USB, because you can do it, but it's a little more complicated how things work that way. And with an interface, you can control different levels and gains and all that stuff. And then headphones, you want everybody to be able to not only monitor your own voice as you're talking, but hear everybody else.
Yeah.
So I would highly recommend investing in an audio interface, but you don't necessarily have to go with a Rode. There are cheaper options out there like the Zoom P-Track 4, which you have. Fosturite is another good one. They have, if you just have one microphone, they have a solo, and they have one that is, a double.
Yeah.
There's a Tascam one that's out there. So many different options, but whatever option you choose, any one is better than
Nothing.
yes, nothing. Using a USB. USB you can get away with at first, but again, multiple mics,
Yeah.
better to have an interface.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yes, and there's always that thing, well, I have the Rodecaster Pro 1. Do I need the Pro 2? It's a whole different subject. Because, yeah. And if you don't have, I guess my answer to that with the caveat is if you're torn between the Rodecaster Pro 1 and the Rodecaster Pro 2, if you plan on using gain-heavy microphones, because now you could buy a Rodecaster Pro 1 for sub $500. The 2 is still about $700. Well, you have to think about if you're using, say, like this Shure microphone in front of me, or the Shure SM7B, even the Rode Pod mics are kind of gain heavy. The preamps in the first Rodecaster Pro aren't that great, so I had to get gain boosters to get cleaner audio out of those gain heavy mics. So there was another, at that time, $80 to $90 per gain booster, and I had 3 of them. So if you need to buy not only the Rodecaster and then your gain boosters,
At that point, you might as well just buy the 2.
yeah,
At that point.
because the preamps in these are so much better. There's a lot more you can do. But again, if you're on a budget and maybe aren't getting those gain heavy mics, maybe the Rodecaster Pro 1 is for you.
Yeah. I literally would do a lot of homework.
Yeah. I mean, there's tons of videos out there
on everything. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
on the benefits of the first one, the second one, the differences. It all depends on what, honestly, you're using it for or could potentially use it for.
Yep.
I don't use this to its full potential, and I love it.
Yeah.
But one thing I didn't like about the first one is the headphone preamps too. They were pretty noisy, and it was hard to tell. Like, you'd hear this noise in your headphones that didn't transfer to the actual final product, but it was kind of noisy in the headphones, especially if you got those gain heavy microphones without a gain booster. So it's like hard to dial in your mic at that point
Yeah.
because you have all this extra noise going on. Whereas whatever we hear now in our headphones
Is what we're actually listening.
going
here.
out because it's so quiet. So if it were me and in our setup and what we use and the mics we use, I would go with the Rodecaster Pro 2.
Yeah.
Just bite the bullet, cry once, and be done with
Yeah.
it.
That was the biggest decision for me to make, was the interface, what I wanted to use. Because I was really wanting to do the Rodecaster Pro. And I was like, I just can't justify it. So
You can't justify it, and then you also didn't have the space.
yeah. And I was like, man. So I went with that other one. And
Yeah.
I think it's great because then it's so easy to move around. It's so small.
And the cool thing about that is it still has some
Presets,
bars to
yeah.
where you can see your audio levels. It's got some sound pads.
Yeah.
It's a little more portable than
Yeah.
this because your wife does go to other places to do her podcast. So
Yep.
it's easier to take around. You can operate it by batteries or plug it in. We used it on our podcast that we did in Nashville. So that is, if you're wanting to move locations, it'd be hard to do with the Rodecaster Pro unless you have a,
Yeah.
dedicated space that you're going to put that on. So if you're limited on space too, get something smaller like the Zoom
Yeah.
PodTrack P4, I think is what you got.
Yep.
And then all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy. You can go down the rabbit hole really quick on everything.
Which is why I did a podcast episode a couple ones ago about gear acquisition syndrome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm like one of those people. I like research.
Oh, yeah.
And it drives me nuts sometimes. I'm like, because then I'll find something else. Like, oh, that's, no, never mind.
No matter what it is, I watch reviews on it first.
That, and I'll go and actually like read comments on things.
Mm-hmm.
You go down that rabbit hole really fast.
I bought a motorcycle before I knew how to ride a motorcycle by watching YouTube videos.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yep.
I spent about a month and a half because I knew I wanted one.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get into a learn to ride course for a while, but you get that like,
itch,
and you're like, I want to get one, and I can't go test drive them because I didn't have my motorcycle license. So then you're watching. I spent literally a month watching tons and tons of videos on different motorcycles, which ones are best for beginners. Ended up buying the one I bought because of watching YouTube videos.
Yeah, that's how it was with the studio stuff. And I was like, and then I started watching Final Cut Pro videos. I'm like, oh my God.
There's some people that are really good at explaining how to do stuff. They go pretty slow and you can kind of follow along. But there's other people that are really good
And
at doing
really fast.
editing, but they go through it so fast.
Yeah, you're sitting there like, go back,
Yeah.
go back.
Like there's this Swedish guy. He's really good at doing video edits, but he goes so fast in his videos. I'm like, holy crap! Like trying to do a speed ramp is kind of complicated. And I was watching his videos on how to do a speed ramp. So difficult to go off of because he's like super comfortable, does it all the time, and all this stuff. And I'm just like, holy crap! Like slow down. Like
I wish, like, I don't know. At our junior college, there was one just for like Final Cut Pro instead of using whatever they use, which I think is Adobe.
Mm-hmm.
But I wish there was more classes just dedicated to Final Cut Pro or Logic Pro.
Or I wish Apple had
a class,
a class, and they don't.
Yeah, I wish.
Buy third-party classes. But
Yeah, you would think because they got classes for every fucking thing else except for their software.
That's one thing that's kept me from going back to the JUCO college is because the programs that they use are Adobe.
Yep.
Subscription based, which I don't want to get into, and they use Canon cameras, whereas I like Sony.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah, it's crazy. I wish that you could tailor it to your own.
Yes, there's online courses you can get, but I like being in a specific class at that point.
Yep. At that point, I would rather be in the class learning.
Yes.
Anything that's hands on.
Exactly. So yeah, I think we'll wrap this one up, but a little bit of things to think about when you're thinking about starting a podcast.
Yeah. There's a lot, actually.
Yeah. There's a lot more that we could go into, but we don't want to bore you or go too long. So we might do a follow-up one, but just some things to think about. Do a lot of research. There's tons of videos out there on other people telling you what you need, what you don't need, what you can get away with, and stuff like that. So, but yeah, definitely think of a topic that you want to talk about. Try and just stay consistent.
Yep.
That is like one thing you have to do is stay consistent.
Like 9/10 of the battle right there.
Right.
It's consistency.
And then just get you a good microphone. And then even if you don't have a great camera, as long as you have good audio for a podcast, that's what people are looking for mostly. So, yeah. And go from there.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, thanks for joining this podcast, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
So hopefully you and your wife
have
a great podcast adventure. And
it's going to be an adventure.
so he has a sign off on our main podcast. I'm going to have him do the same one now. Well, only for this podcast channel.
Remember, this is a YouTube podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and tickle that bell. If you're listening on any other platforms, remember, hit that follow. With that one, have a good one.